Hello and welcome to the NFL DFS on the RotoRadar podcast. My name is Joshua Riemer. I'm joined by none other than the man, the myth, the legend, Jared Block, who is over on my right. Jared, how are you doing this fine Thursday afternoon?
Doing well, man. We've been talking about weather on the NBA show. It's not cold anymore for at least 4 days, and that's going to affect the NFL slate this week. But gross week of football on the main slate. Got some really good primetime things. So I'm excited about that. A game in Germany, but we're in the thick of it. I don't know about your fantasy teams, but like I think I'm just ready to just skip to Monday or Tuesday and just see how it goes because I have like 7 guys on bye in each league I'm in. Not good
Oh
planning on my
no.
part, but yeah, that's what it was.
Dude, my one of my best leagues, I have a Philly stack. I have Hurts and AJ Brown. I have who else has buys next week? I don't know. I'm facing like I'm the top of the league right now. I'm facing the number 2 guy next week, and I have all my buys next week. It's going to be a bad situation for me. I luckily don't have too many buys this week outside of my Niners players that aren't going to be able to play, which kind of sucks because need some of them. But we're going to keep rolling. Yeah, I feel you though. Buys are definitely hurting this week for sure. This is going to be one of the bigger bye weeks. There's only a few left actually. I think week
hmm
14 is when we stop these bye weeks, and so um, it's not only for DFS at least, it's not only the bye weeks, but it's also the fact that we were kind of talking about it before the show. Primetime games hold a lot of the great teams, Dolphins, Chiefs, Bengals, Bills, all on primetime games. So not going to be able to use them on the main slate. That's a little bit
Right.
infuriating. It makes things a little bit tougher. We'll make the show a little bit shorter than it was last week because last week we did 2.5 hours because we had 13 games on the slate, or close to 13, maybe it was 12. Now only 10 on the slate. Should be fun to talk through. We got a long slate ahead of us. So without further ado, if you're ready, I'm ready. Let's get into this thing, man.
Yep. Let's go and get into it, man.
All right. First game up is going to be the Minnesota Vikings facing off against the Atlanta Falcons. Falcons 4.5 point favorites. Over under is an ugly, ugly 37. Let's talk about this Minnesota side first. Obviously, a devastating injury to Kirk Cousins, who is going to be out for the rest of the season with that Achilles injury. We got the report that they are going to end up starting rookie Jaren Hall instead of going with any of the other options. They traded for Josh Dobbs. They have Nick Mullins, but he's currently on IR due to a neck injury. So they decided to go with Jaren Hall. We'll see next week if it's going to be Josh Dobbs after he gets a little bit more acclimated to the offense. But this team was kind of going on all cylinders, and Jordan Addison was looking really good. And so it's really disappointing to see a rookie come in here where we don't really know the skill set. I know you're the preseason wizard, so maybe you can give us the down low on who Jaren Hall is and what we should expect from him in this game.
Well, there's not much to say about it because this is a situation where we saw a lot of guys that weren't Jaron Hall in the preseason. I mean, we saw a little bit of it, but it was a lot of Sean Mannion and a few guys that were cut. So that's kind of where things are at right now. But Jaron Hall, I know, like I watched that was against my Packers last week. So I was watching the game, watched some of what they were doing, and I mean, not a great move necessarily to get him out in the pocket and where the game was at the time, making him actually throw the ball. But he does have more mobility than Kirk Cousins. He does have good pocket presence. Obviously didn't look great in the 2 drives that he was out there in, but able to connect with TJ Hawkinson a couple times was really the main focus that I wanted to put on what this meant for fantasy. And I think that a week under his belt, you can run the similar style of offense. Obviously, Kirk definitely more an accurate pocket passer than Jaren Hall is going to be throughout the rest of this season. But it does look like they're going to give him as much of a leash as possible. I do not expect anything to go horribly wrong. I mean, I think that, what I meant to say was like, I don't think he's going to get cut. And I don't think they're going to bench him necessarily. And with what's going to happen this week, just because of the short stint here, I guess in case of emergency, Josh Dobbs comes in and maybe is a factor here. If I think he's purely in here just for injury reasons. I don't know. I think that Jaren Hall, It's not obviously in play, but I think his weapons potentially could be. The only thing that really interests me here is going to be with TJ Hawkinson, specifically on a site like DraftKings, where I do feel like the tight end position has a limited amount of options here. Obviously, everybody went to Trey McBride last week. But I think that you don't really have that guy this week, and so that's where TJ Hawkinson can kind of come in and be the main focus, main guy that helps out this system here. So that's kind of where I would lean. But again, maybe a little bit too expensive on FanDuel is TJ Hawkinson at 6,700. I don't know. Things are kind of thin for this play, and I think that Hall has the ability to be a dual threat. I would expect, I think the floor of rushing yards is like 20 plus, maybe even 30 in this spot. And Atlanta has defended the wide receiver one well. I don't know. I'm back and forth on Jordan Addison at these price tags now. So that's kind of where it starts and ends. TJ Hawkinson for me. Got to keep an eye on KJ Osborne with the chest injury. He was in and out of the game last time out. And I have no interest in the running backs. I don't think that we should be targeting them. And I think that last week was the tilt of where Cam Akers takes over the RB1 role.
Yeah, I mean, feels like every week we say this, right?
Well, he
Cam
scored a
Akers
touchdown last week.
Yeah,
So.
it still got out touched though by like 6 touches or 7
I know.
touches. Like
I know.
it's that rushing attack is so poor, and it only gets worse because now teams can really stack the box. Yeah, it's definitely awful. They got their first rushing touchdown of the year in that game against the Packers. I don't know if that says something about you. I was going to say I don't know if that means something against your Packers, but I can relate. Our rush defense is pretty awful as well right now, so I feel your pain. Anything else on this Viking side? Like I don't know. Everything feels a little bit iffy when it comes to Jaren Hall over on DraftKings. Is there any consideration for him at the QB position being at 4,800?
No, I think you have a guy that is too cheap for what his spot is and what his role plays in Daniel Jones, and so I think that we'll talk about him a lot today and that Giants team. Or otherwise, you can just pay up at quarterback this week and you can feel just fine about it.
For sure. All right. Let's talk about the Falcons side. They're also going through a QB change for a whole different reason, though. Desmond Ridder ends up getting the bench seat, and we get to see Taylor Heineke elevated to the starting QB position. I guess I'm kind of excited. Like I think this is a more elite pocket passer, and I feel like he can really support guys like Drake London and Kyle Pitts. It's just how much trust can you put in this passing situation with Taylor Heineke?
I think you can actually feel pretty confident about it. I think that this is going to be a spot where the problem is like, can you trust in Arthur Smith? That's the problem. But I think Taylor Heineke is the better QB for this system. I do think that he has the ability to be in a good spot this week. Like if you were desperate at QB in your fantasy leagues, like I am, this is a guy that you could definitely pick up and feel pretty confident in the start against this Minnesota secondary. I know that the Packers weren't able to move anything, but everybody else has been able to against this team. So I don't mind some of the weapons. I think that you just need, like, this is an interesting tournament stack. It's not cash game playable. None of this game really is outside of the Hawkinson stuff. But we need to keep an eye on Drake London. He was a DNP with a groin injury yesterday, and so that's going to really be potentially sweaty. It could open up some value, but it's not something I'm looking at as of this moment today, but it could be a thing in a couple days.
Yeah, for sure. I can definitely get behind that. And in the running back room, I mean, they're like I've lost all faith in like the Bijan running back room. 11 rushing attempts last week, 5 targets, 0 receptions. Maybe his targets, his receiving game ends up getting helped out a little bit by the fact Taylor Heineke's back there instead of
I think it
Desmond
will
Ridder.
help a
But
little bit.
yeah, I still just can't trust it at this point. I mean, after the Tampa Bay week and then last week, a really bad week, it's going to be rough to get behind Bijan at 7,100 until they bring down this price a little bit more. And who knows if they even will. Do you have any trust in it for tournaments or anything else?
So the Vikings have been a pass funnel this year. We know that. Outside of the Philly game where they ran all over them, they've been pretty consistent here. So over the course of the year, they ranked in the top 10 in terms of allowing the least amount of fantasy points to running backs. I think Bijan is Bijan, right? But I am seeing the running back position is very loaded this week. So I think that he just needs to be a guy that we can say is in consideration just based on the fact that he is going to just be in a spot where he's just really cheap, right? So that's you're going to see his name a lot in a lot of places on DraftKings because he is 6,100 now. I don't know if I'm necessarily willing to just go ahead and say we're playing him at this stage of the week, but it certainly is a spot where the price is affecting everything. We weren't playing him because he was super expensive, because he paid off in a few spots earlier in the year. But I do not like I really respect the Vikings defense, but it is alarming and noteworthy to put out that they are obviously in the bottom 5 of allowing fantasy points to opposing wide receivers, but in the top 10 in terms of defending the running back position.
Yeah, for sure. Anything else in this game? If not, let's move on to pick'em stuff and talk about that.
It could be something that evolves over the course of the week with the Falcons, where we might be a little bit more interested because, again, like, I don't know, you're catching the Vikings team at a really good opportunity to potentially, these two teams. I mean, the Falcons are still much in the playoff race, and so I think that
Yeah,
they'll, the QB change is one that I think is a positive for them.
for sure. All right, let's talk about the pick'em situation. Let's talk about this Vikings team first. Is there anything that you like? There's not many numbers up over on PrizePicks, but you do have a TJ Hawkinson number up at 49.5 receiving yards.
That's kind of where I would look. Hawkinson receptions, Hawkinson yards. I won't touch anything else on this side probably.
Fair enough. Falcon side, also not many props up, but you do have some Bijan numbers, some Tyler Algier numbers. At some point, I'm just going to start taking unders on Bijan numbers. They're overinflated around the industry. If I get, 58 and a half, I'm pretty willing to take it under there. And just, if it hurts me, it hurts me. But he's been consistently just not that involved in the run game.
Yeah, I mean, how much do you play? Like, I know that it's been more than just that 1 week where he was sick. It just inflates the whole argument, right? But yeah,
Yeah.
I think that I'm always scared of Bijan total yards numbers because one play and he's there. Really only shown that a couple times this season. But yeah, I'm unwilling to go on the under of rushing yards as well. It doesn't feel great, but I understand.
Maybe it's rushing attempts. Maybe if you can find that number somewhere, if
Sure,
it's anywhere around like 13 and a half, I think I'd be willing to take that under.
sure.
You're right in saying that, he's there most of the time, but even if you don't include that Tampa Bay week, he still goes under this number 4 out of the 6 weeks he's played this season. So like
Sure.
rushing number, not the total yards number in terms of rushing and pass or receiving. Um, yeah, I don't know. I just can't rely on the situation. I might as well bet on the under.
I'm slightly interested in Heineke numbers. The 228 and a half pass rushing yard looks pretty good. All depends on some Drake London stuff. Obviously, if he's out, I won't touch that. But 11 and a half rushing yards for Heineke. We know this is a guy that can scramble 4 or 5 times. Not going to get too many designed runs necessarily, but he knows that he has the ability to beat guys, the linebacker group for Minnesota. So I think that 11 and a half rushing yards is a number that's too low. All depends on scheme, though. And that's kind of where I worry a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely can get behind that. All right. Let's talk about, or is there anything else you want to talk about on the prize pick side? If not, we'll move on.
No, we can move on.
All right. Bears and Saints coming up next. Currently, the Bears are 8.5 point or underdogs on the road against the Saints. Over under is at 41. Let's talk about this Bears team. Still going to be with Tyson Bagent in this game. It's very tough matchup compared to what we got last week. I know some things were encouraging from Bagent in terms of the receiving or the passing yards. I know he threw those 2 interceptions too, which were pretty tough. But now you go up against a Saints defense that is very, very solid overall. What can you feel comfortable with when it comes to this? When it comes to this Chicago Bears passing offense?
Nothing. You can't feel confident in anything. I think that this is a spot where you fade the Bears, and just like we did on Sunday night or Monday night, whatever prime time. I think it was Sunday night. I just don't have any interest in attacking anything, even if like against the Chargers, some of those spots were enticing, but against the Saints, on the road, no interest there.
Yeah, for sure. I can definitely get behind it. Not really much interest to be had. Let's talk about the Saints side and talk about a guy who I think is definitely a pretty solid option, definitely coming at a high price tag, though. Alvin Kamara finds himself at 9,200 over on FanDuel, but the overall upside here is pretty solid against a Bears team that, they get Montez Sweat back. I don't know, or they get Montez Sweat in that trade this week. I don't know how much that affects this week's defense, if at all. But Kamara going up against a good matchup. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think Kamara is a fantastic option. Talked about the loaded running back position. Starts with him this week. 9,200 on FanDuel. He's the highest priced player on the slate, which is crazy, but warranted because of how much he's been used in the passing game, and just the touches overall. Like, he comes in, and we thought that maybe Jamal Williams would take something, maybe Kendre Miller would take something, but it's clearly just Kamara here, and even more so, it's hurting some of the wide receivers as well with how much he's actually being involved in everything. He is their offense, and they'll even sprinkle Taysom Hill in there. It's a very infuriating thing if you
Oh
have
man.
anybody else in your fantasy leagues. I think that you just roll with the Kamara spot, especially on DraftKings. I think that's where he's a no-brainer play at 8,100. You are able to get to him fairly easily and feel very good about it. I think that on FanDuel, he won't be very, very hard to get to either. And he's scoring touchdowns now as of last week. So that is very, very enticing to see on a touchdown-heavy site like FanDuel is. He's just a guy that's going to get 20 touches and sometimes explode for 25, 30 touches. And if you get that from him against this Bears situation that, honestly, running backs against the Bears, we've targeted it a lot. And a lot of the time it hasn't worked out this year, but I think this time it's going to work out pretty well.
Yeah, I think the receiving game being so intact for Kamara is really going to help him out in this situation, and I just like the overall upside. Man, he's included in every part of the game. The only guy more included in this offense feels like Taysom Hill right now, who's just continues to be a monster. 21 FanDuel points last week.
Yeah,
Oh gosh,
ridiculous. It's stupid.
it's awful. It's awful. All right. What else do we want to talk about here in the passing game? You kind of mentioned it. We've seen some of these wide receivers take a little bit of a dip. One of those guys hasn't been Michael Thomas. He's actually been playing really, really well as of recent, at least for the price tag. But we saw Rashid Shaheed absolutely have a monster week with 3 catches, 150 yards, and a couple touchdowns in there. Chris Olave's been struggling, especially for the price tag you're currently getting him at. Is there anything in this passing game that entices you for the Saints? They won't really be playing from behind most likely, so like it could be a very limited passing day for Derek Carr and these Saints.
Yeah, you get really nice price tags for these guys. So I think that if you want to get off of Alvin Kamara in tournaments, this is where you would obviously start. Olave probably garners cash consideration. It's tough to play, both of those guys in the same lineup and feel good about it, but you can do that this week if you wanted to. I mean, 6,300 on DraftKings, 6,900 on FanDuel. He was always in that range in the mid sevens where I didn't really feel comfortable about it. But now it's in a spot where you get a little bit less exciting stuff in the wide receiver room this week, just in general on the entire card. So that's obviously one clear streamer spot that you can get excited about. Thomas is dealing with an illness. He was limited yesterday. He'll probably be limited today too. We'll see how that goes. He'll probably be able to kick it, hopefully, and them not traveling will help that situation. I think that they're fine. I think that the receivers are fine. Taysom Hill also dealing with a hip injury too, so that'll be interesting to monitor ahead of this week too. So we'll see how it goes. I think that it all starts and ends with Alvin Kamara on FanDuel though, and this is going to be a gross thing to try to decide. You have to decide just the way things are shaping out. If you pay up at quarterback, you have to decide whether or not you want to play Alvin Kamara or whether or not you want to play A.J. Brown against the Dallas Cowboys with Jalen Hurts as a quarterback in that build. So that's where we're
Yeah.
sitting right now.
Yeah, pretty rough week overall, but we'll get to that. We'll get to that Eagles game soon. Let's talk about pick'em stuff if you're ready to go over there.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Uh, well, yeah, okay. Let's move on. Let's talk about the pick'em stuff. I think Kamara numbers are really solid. Half pass rush receiving touchdown is really, really good for the situation here. I even think 18.5 fantasy score is really solid. What do you like here, and what can you get behind for the Saints team?
Yeah. What did you say his fantasy number was? Is there one?
18 and a half
Oh,
on a
yeah,
PPR site.
easy. You play
Yeah.
that.
I agree. I definitely agree. I don't
I
mind
mean,
taking half a touchdown too. I think most likely there's ways that he doesn't score 18 and a half fantasy score, but he does score a touchdown. I don't think there's many ways that he misses out on this touchdown this week. I'd be curious to
yeah.
see his ATD odds.
I mean, there's always a way that he doesn't, and Taysom steals all of them. But I think that he still is completely fine to get that, regardless of scoring a touchdown. I mean, he's cleared it several times this season without having to do that, just because of the passing game volume.
Mm-hmm.
I think he'll be just fine. Like Prize Picks, you hit that now if you're listening before Sunday, because that probably hits closer to 20 come Sunday, and I think that even is just fine too. When Underdog releases the fantasy number, it probably will sit around 15, 16. I'm fine with it over. If you don't get it, which I think is, you will get it at some point, but I'm really enticed with the receiving yard number at 32 and a half. We played the rushing yard number, and that was very sweaty and tilting to sweat out. I would not suggest doing that moving forward. I'd probably just stick with fantasy.
Only minus 125 for him to score a touchdown. I felt like that would be like a minus 200 play.
Well, that'll probably go up if Taysom doesn't play.
Yeah, it certainly will. All right. Anything else here, Jared? I figure we're not taking any Bears numbers because it's the Bears against the Saints defense.
Yep, would be a candidate to go under for Donta Foreman, rush receiving at 46 and a half as Urshawn Johnson starts to get more work under his belt. I'm also okay with Tyson Bagent, anything related to turnovers, and the numbers for pass rush are really low, so I'll probably stay away from that.
For sure. All right. Let's talk about this next game, which is going to be the Tampa Bay Buccaneers facing off against the Houston Texans. Currently, Texans come in at 2.5-point favorites. Over under is set at 40 flat. Let's talk about this Tampa Bay team. Baker coming in a little bit banged up, but looks like he's going to be good to go regardless this week. He practiced in full with that knee injury. This is a Texans team that just got sadly lost to the only team that didn't have a win yet and
Yep.
gave the Panthers that big win. What do we like from this Tampa Bay team? And can you get behind a guy like Rachaad White, especially when this Houston team seems like they're getting gashed in terms of their rushing game?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not the Houston Texans of old necessarily. I think that there's spots where they have been the same old Texans in terms of giving up fantasy points to opposing running backs, but the numbers this season and even in the last 4 weeks aren't that bad. So I don't really think that I want to go that direction necessarily. I think, again, the running back position is loaded, so you can make cases for White if you want to. Personally, I think he's a little bit further down my list. So I'm probably out there, and I think that he will just continue to be a candidate to get work stolen from him. We kind of talked about that last week with Chase Edmonds and now Keyshawn Vaughn in the mix a little bit more. The passing game volume still is there, and that's where you're going to get a lot of stuff. So maybe on DraftKings at 5,600, that makes him sound like a pretty decent play. But I'm probably just off of it. Like there are guys that are well within this range that I think we can feel a little bit more confident on. We'll say I've been down on Rachaad White the whole season, so that a little bit of my bias comes from that. I'm a little bit more enticed on DraftKings than FanDuel for him, though.
Yeah, definitely like the upside. I think like he's going to continue to get this passing work. He might lose a little bit of the rushing work, but at the end of the day, like mainly his passing work is what you're getting your DFS viability from. So I
Sure.
think the matchup like he had, I mean, you look at the beginning of this schedule: Buffalo, Atlanta, Detroit, Saints, Philly,
Yeah,
and then
it's gross.
Chicago, Minnesota. Like he had the toughest 5 week schedule that I think we've seen for a running back in quite some time. And so now you get a matchup against Houston, and from what I saw, this matchup only gets easier as the year goes on. Just keep an eye out for Rachaad White. Don't be shocked if we see him closer to that 8K range once he really
Sure.
starts getting going against some of these worst defenses that he's going to face off against coming up. Because the fact that he produced at all in this range is pretty impressive. 2 back-to-back weeks with 10 FanDuel points is really solid.
Sure. I
All
mean, I
right.
don't think we should expect anything more than like 12 rushing attempts, but the passing volume is very solid.
Yeah, I mean, as long as he's getting around 5 to 7 or 5 to 8 targets, I'm perfectly fine with the spot. All right, let's talk about the rest of this offense. So let's talk about the QB position, Baker Mayfield. Any interest in him or his weapons in Mike Evans and Chris Godwin?
Middling interest. I don't really think that you need to go out of your way to play Bucks. Baker is cheap, so that certainly is something that's interesting for tournaments. Uh, I think this game is just really kind of difficult to read. Um, we'll talk about Houston on the other side, but they're facing adversity, obviously, and seeing what Stroud's going to be able to do coming off of a tough loss to a bad football team. I think that the Bucks have real pathways to win here. I think that it does depend heavily on Mike Evans' involvement. We saw them for the first time just kind of not get him involved whatsoever, and it was a very gross game against Buffalo. But a Buffalo team that doesn't have anybody on the perimeter, right? So
Yeah.
I was very surprised to see Mike Evans, thankfully, salvage his day with a touchdown late in the game. But really weird involvement from him, his lowest target share of the entire season. Again, if I think that they kind of correct that this week, I think that they'll try to go after this. Tough matchup for Evans, but I think Baker, if he forces it in there, should have success in that spot. So I don't know. Again, it's not cash game viable, but the game stack scenario could be interesting.
Yeah, it certainly could be interesting. I could definitely get behind it in tournaments. It's not very cash game viable at the end of the day, though. Anything else on this Tampa Bay side? If not, let's talk about the Texans.
No, I think the Tampa side is kind of just Rashad White. Kind of have some interest on DraftKings, but nothing really stands out for a top play here.
Okay, let's talk about the other side and talk about this Tampa Bay defense facing off against this Houston offense. Over the last 4 weeks, what we've seen is that the Tampa Bay defense has really struggled against QBs and really struggled against wide receivers as well. You can probably blame at least a little bit of that on the matchup. You know, Jared Goff, Josh Allen, Derek Carr as well from the Saints. But at the end of the day, there certainly is some struggles. So can we expect CJ Stroud to get things going here and have a bounce back game from whatever last week was?
Yeah, I mean, again, like the same thing applies for Rashad White's tough matchups. They've faced some pretty elite quarterback and just elite offenses recently. So I think that this is a spot where, like, obviously Stroud is on the lower end of that list, but at the same time, this is going to be a test for him. This is going to be a spot where they lost a game they probably shouldn't have lost to, and the fact that Bryce Young beats him is just icing on the cake there. So, how does he bounce back from adversity? Doesn't hasn't really had much adversity and has surprised at the NFL level. But now 3 straight games of under 16 fantasy points. How does he bounce back here? It's really going to hedge on the fact of like, is Damian Pierce healthy or not? And I don't think they'll be able to run the football necessarily against this Tampa front seven, who I still respect. And that kind of depends on Vita Vea playing too. But I think that this is a spot where I'm probably just out on Stroud in general. I want to see it before I can just feel confident in blindly playing it necessarily. So this will be a tough test for adversity overcoming, and we'll see if he's able to do it. But the thing that I've noticed just recently here is the fact that they are just not letting him throw the football as much lately, and that's a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely is a problem. I feel like they should be letting him throw the football a little bit more, but yeah, 24 pass attempts this past week, 27 the week before that. Not really a good spot in terms of his passing production overall.
No, it's not. So the whole thing here is like the whole industry, including us, got burned by Tank Dell last week. I think that this is a better spot on paper, but it's something where like he'll pop because his price tag is very cheap. I don't think he's gonna be in my FanDuel lineup this week. I just think that there are other better spots and other better players or better situations, I should say. We do expect Robert Woods to sit again, so that's why Tank Dell is going to pop a little bit, but it's not something I'm excited to play by any means.
Yeah, and they've even shown that like they're willing to go to Noah Brown. He got receptions this last week. John Mechie, another guy that they're consistently willing to go to. Even Xavier Hutchinson, another rookie from this class. You know, like just because Robert Woods is out, Tank Dell still gets stuff stolen from him. It feels like from these other wide receivers instead of letting
Yeah.
us see exactly who he is. So frustrating situation with that wide receiver core over there in Houston. Anything else here? I think that, Dalton Schultz is kind of played out of the picture, especially after a putrid performance last week. But I'm kind of fine with fading everything else, and let's talk about some pick'em stuff.
Yeah, I think that we just need to figure out. Well, we don't really need to figure it out. I'm curious to see what happens with Dameon Pierce this week. He missed practice yesterday due to an ankle injury. We'll see. It sounds like he is truly up in the air, and I couldn't be less excited to play. I would just fade the entire Texans team at that point, because if they don't have Pierce, they probably can't move the football, and then things get really ugly.
Yeah, without a doubt. All right, let's move on into the pick'em conversation. I don't know, this one's ugly, man. Like, if you have anything you want to talk about, go for it. I guess like a no, I'm not even going to take a shot. I don't want to recommend something that's fishy and people think I'm actually on it. So I think I'd rather just stay away this on this side of things for this game.
Well, this is purely biased on my fantasy teams and the futures market just in general. Mike Evans, I expect to have a bounce back week this week. I know that he
Yeah.
scored the touchdown, but 52 and a half receiving yards for Mike Evans is just something that I'm willing to bet on the over of that, just based on historics, based on this season. People thought that he was just going to tank and not get another 1,000-yard season because Baker Mayfield was quarterback. Obviously, last week doesn't help that conversation, but still definitely on pace for that this year.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Anything else in this game? If not, let's talk about your Packers.
No, let's talk about how I'm going to be there, but not going to watch the game.
Oh no, yeah. All right, let's talk about this game. Rams facing off against the Packers. Packers come in as 3.5 point favorites, man. That's
Yep.
I don't know about that. Over under at 38.5. Rams team got embarrassed on Sunday yesterday, or on last Sunday against the Cowboys. They didn't look like, I mean, they looked awful all the way around. But I expect a bounce back this week. I don't know about this. Uh, let's talk about the Rams first. I guess maybe this is kind of baked into the fact that Stafford won't practice
Correct.
today, and there's
Yep.
a very good chance that we're going to end up getting Brett Ripon as the QB for this team. What do we think about the whole QB situation, and what can we really break down here if we don't know who the QB is going to be?
Yeah, we expected Stafford not to play or not to practice yesterday for vet purposes, and he is going to be in a spot where I don't expect him to practice really at all. He might take some first team reps on Friday before the team flies to Green Bay, but I truly think this is as close to a game time decision as possible. It might even be a Schefter bomb Saturday night, where they say he does or does not play, and that could even change Sunday morning. So what that tells us is, like, I think that Brett Rippon could actually still be somebody, and it's not the situation of like we're playing the quarterback. It's more so, do we have interest in receivers? So I don't know. I don't have a lean right now with Stafford, and then Vegas obviously expects that Rippon's probably the quarterback here. But the more important thing to look out for here is whether or not Puka Nacua is going to play. He's going to be limited in practice this week, probably, and he has a knee injury. He's probably going to be fine with this, but you are getting Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua finally. After a couple of rough games here, Puka had a big week against Pittsburgh, but they both failed last week. I think that you see that. I don't know, man. I don't know. I mean, you watched the Vikings Packers game. We talked about how Jordan Addison was really feeling it before he got an injury, but I think that this Packers team is just decimated on a defensive end. They traded Rasul Douglas to the Bills at the trade deadline. They basically had Jair Alexander cooked from Jordan Addison last weekend, and vibes are not great right now. They also lost Eric Stokes for the season, most likely. So they are beat up everywhere, and not having Rasul Douglas is going to mean that Cooper Kupp should be able to do whatever he wants this week, regardless of quarterback.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw the locker room talk from Jair Alexander. I
Oh, he
saw a
just,
comparison.
yeah.
I saw a comparison of
Yeah.
week one after y'all won, and like you guys, he was saying something. He was just praising the offense basically, and then this week he was like, "Man, we got to make sure they score zero and we score instead of the offense because we can't rely on those young guys." Like, It's bad vibes over in Green Bay right now. And then they came out this week. I think the GM or someone came out and said they're not sure if Jordan Love is the long term answer now. And oh man, it feels all types of bad here.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly does. We'll talk about. I don't have time to talk about the reasons why like Jordan Love's. It's not like all his fault kind of stuff. So
Yeah,
defense has played horribly. Offense has played horribly. So I think the
yeah.
Rams have a real chance of winning this one. Uh, I think it is based around like I'd feel much better if Stafford was in, but I do think that the Rams will be able to get there with Cooper Kupp this week. I expect a bounce back week. Don't believe what the opponent ranking stuff tells you. They again lost their cornerback too, and Eric Stokes, and they also lost potentially, arguably, I think that Rasul Douglas was having a better year than Jair Alexander was anyway. So, and they lost him, so it's going to be a rough one. And I think that Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua both have really enticing outlooks. They won't be popular cash game plays because no one wants to play them and trust in the quarterback stuff. But I'll definitely have my tournament shares there.
Yeah, I could definitely get behind the tournament stuff for sure. Uh, Talking about the running back room, any interest in Daryl Henderson in this spot? If they're going to have a backup QB, I would assume that means more touches for Henderson. And this is one of, I mean, we're getting close to the time that Kyron Williams is going to end up returning to this team too. So,
Mm-hmm.
is it Daryl Henderson week potentially, especially against such a bad run defense?
Yeah, it looks like we We still have a couple more. I think. Oh well, Kyron's not going to play this week. He might be eligible to return next week, maybe week 11. Darrell Henderson would be the guy that I would feel okay with. I don't think he's a clear smash play by any means, just because they are still giving Royce Freeman some work here, and they showed that giving him the ball to get the rushing touchdown against Dallas, obviously probably because they were down by so much, but I think Darrell Henderson's fine for tournaments. I think that he is in play. It's just not something I think we have to do because the running back position again is pretty loaded.
I think the Henderson run back with like a Love and Christian Watson, Romeo Dobbs stack is something that I would look at for tournament stacks potentially. Speaking
Yeah,
of
I mean
Jordan
it's
Love
it's
and Romeo,
definitely in play. Again, we're gonna have to force ourselves to be pretty uncomfortable with both cash and tournament plays this week, just because of the week that it is. We have like 5 games under 40 points, so that's kind of where this thing sits. But the good news, at least for this game, and just for in general, we don't have like any weather to talk about outside of tonight's game, Thursday night. But yeah, the most of the country, including Green Bay, is getting a warm front this week, so this game's going to play in the 50s.
yeah, for sure. All right, anything else in this game, Jared? If not, let's move. Well, hold on, got to talk about the Green Bay side. Anything else on this Rams side before we talk about Green Bay a little bit?
No, I think that we just have to kind of anticipate that Stafford is as day to day as possible, and that will obviously affect ownership. And I think that just in general, I really like the upside that Cooper Cup brings this week when we have, um, you know, him very close in price to guys that are on this slate and Devontae Adams, AJ Brown, Alvin Kamara, that will all be more popular than he will.
For sure. All right, let's talk about this QB position. I think there is a chance that Jordan Love could have a little bit of a bounce back week this week. And in terms of DFS, like he contributes enough on the ground and he does enough through the air to where some of these scores don't look that bad and the ceiling isn't that bad either. Like how much do you like Jordan Love in this spot against the Rams defense that really hasn't been able to stop the passing game anyway?
Well, I think it truly just revolves around the health of Aaron Jones, and we've seen that without that, the whole scheme doesn't work. And there's just a lot going on here. It's a young team. I think that they just make so many mistakes on their own that Jordan just gets blamed for it. And so, like in terms of fantasy, I agree with you. The floor certainly is there. It still is in the single digits, unfortunately, just because we know that if they can't score touchdowns, then nothing happens for this offense. But the rushing floor is very good. The pass attempts are consistent, and I think that he just needs touchdowns to be able to get there. Against this Rams team, I don't really have. I guess I mean I have a little bit of faith that things look better than they were going to look against the Broncos. I don't know, man. I'm probably just like if Aaron Jones isn't playing, I just don't really have much interest here because I don't think that the offense will continue to work if he doesn't play.
Yeah, for sure. I can definitely definitely understand that. Um, is there any interest in like a Christian Watson spot? I mean, like at 6K, you're getting a really good price tag. He's gotten the targets look really good. If you look at anything else, you're pretty disappointed. But like, what do you think about this Christian Watson spot?
I'm only playing the only wide receiver I'll play in anything is Dobbs because he's the guy that's been getting the touchdowns and they look his way. Watson, yeah, the targets looked all right last week. Definitely, got saved by the long catch against Vegas, but outside of that, he's just had a really, really poor season. So I think there's a lot of things that are wrong here, but the one consistent staple really has been Dobbs in the end zone.
For sure. Do you expect Aaron Jones to play this week? No, he's limited at practice today. Definitely is interesting to see, but I don't know if I would take it a running back against this Rams team anyway because they're pretty
Yeah.
solid against the running back position overall.
Well, we're not playing this spot regardless of the matchup because Jones just hasn't eclipsed enough touches to feel good about it in cash outside of week one where he got hurt. And so this hamstring, I think, is just going to be, unfortunately, it's like if you had stock in Aaron Jones, you probably are benched him, if not, traded away or even dropped maybe. I just don't think that he eclipses 15 touches anytime soon, and that's just going to be really bad. The coach talk was that I can't remember if it was this week or like the tail end of, or like Monday or after the game. Like Matt LaFleur came out and said that Aaron Jones just isn't healthy, and they're going to continue to monitor that. And he's not going to be close to 100% is what the terminology was, I think.
For sure. All right. Anything else in this game? If not, let's move over to prize picks and underdog.
Yeah, I mean, if Jones or Luke Musgrave was also on the injury report, if either of those guys miss, I still wouldn't. I don't think this is a value spot you should feel good about.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. All right, let's move on. Talk about some pick'em options. I don't know. Where do you want to start with this? I guess it probably starts with some Rams numbers here, but yeah, I was about to say I doubt we have any. Not knowing the QB situation on the Packers
Yeah.
side, though, Romeo Dobbs does he entice you at 39.5 receiving yards and 3.5 receptions?
Sort of. Not really. I mean, the Rams are kind of
No,
just middle of the pack everywhere. So I'm just not really super interested in much here for Pick'em. And again, like we're gonna have probably limited interest in any Pick'em related situations just because the slate is what it is. I would be interested in potentially some passing numbers for any quarterback, whoever the quarterback is. Like that's kind of where I would sit there. And Matt, I don't know the Stafford stuff. Like it's the UCL on his thumb on his throwing hand, I think. So, or yeah, it has to be because he'd play otherwise. So, yeah, that's a rough look. But I think that again, you're getting a Packers defense that is just not good, and you're going to see those season numbers trend downward because of the trades and the injuries.
for sure. All right. Anything else in this game, Jared? If not, let's move on to the next one.
No, no, let's move on.
All right, next game up is going to be the Arizona Cardinals facing off against the Cleveland Browns. Currently, the Browns come in as 8-point favorites. Over under is at 37. Let's talk about this Arizona team first. We got the news that Josh Dobbs was not going to start, ended up getting traded out of town. It is either going to be Kyler Murray or Clayton Tune. Do you have a read on which one this is going to be? Because Kyler Murray logs another full practice, looks pretty close to being good to go. What do you think about this whole situation at the QB position?
Well, I feel like we. I, I don't know necessarily. I thought that I came into the podcast thinking that it was going to be Clayton Tune the whole time, and Kyler Murray would start next week. But I guess we'll just see how it goes. I know he logged a practice on Wednesday, and it looks like they're just ramping him up. Um, I don't know. We'll have to just wait and see. I think we're waiting on Kyler Murray to be activated, and as of right now, I don't think he is. So
He
I
is
think they'll
not.
make that move or announcement soon. But it sounds like Clayton Tune's been working with the ones as far as Wednesday and potentially Thursday morning goes. But again, we'll see. Maybe it comes up in the podcast today. Maybe we'll get that news while we're doing this. But I'm not super sure. I would say things point towards Tune playing. Either way, it's a disaster against Cleveland. And I would say that I think that they're man. I think we talked about this last week when we talked about the Cardinals. I think that they have another really tough matchup next week too. But yeah, maybe that's influencing their decision on what they want to do and bringing him back. But either way, you're not playing the QB spot in this position, and you're not playing anybody on Arizona against Cleveland at home.
Man, it's a really sad time when I type in Cardinal schedule to Google and it gives me the St. Louis Cardinal schedule. Might tell you it was something around Arizona there. Falcons next week, Texans the week after that. I mean, things get a lot easier after this week, so maybe they're waiting till next week to do that. But I think it's just going to be a wait and see on that front until we get more news. And until we get more news, like how much can you break down this offense? Because I think guys like Marquise Brown and some of these other weapons, like we saw how much Kyler used Zach Ertz, so I think Trey McBride takes a huge step forward. But until we get that news, like we just I don't know, you're shooting a dart at a you're trying to find. It's just going to be a really tough situation.
Well, I mean, Trey McBride could actually finish at tight end top 10 potentially towards the end
Yeah,
of the season. I
really
think
good.
Ertz is done. I don't think he's playing again this season. Just with the way things are going, you get the new guy up in here, and he had a fantastic game. Now, a lot of this was he made some impressive plays. Don't get me wrong, but a lot of it was just garbage time stuff, and that's just what this Arizona stuff's going to be against Cleveland. Though I'm 100% out on the McBride stuff. I'll wait till his price comes down a little bit more to attack that again.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely I think the Trey McBride spot's going to be really solid. I traded for Trey McBride in a dynasty league like 2 years ago and have just held him on my team for so long. And seeing it all come to fruition now is really nice. And I think, like I said, especially with how Kyler Murray used Zach Ertz last year and the year before, I think the McBride spot's going to be really solid throughout the rest of the year. All
Question
right,
though,
anything else?
do we think, like, okay, let's say hypothetically Kyler plays this week, obviously terrible matchup, but who's to say that he just is good at football anymore? I know that's a terrible thing to say, but do
Yeah.
we even know?
No. No, we don't. I mean, I think we're just kind of assuming, but it's going to be a wait and see situation. I think that, especially coming off of the ACL injury, like that rushing floor that he used to have, it's gone. It's gone for probably the whole season. I don't think you see like a consistent
Correct.
rushing floor throughout until 2024. Who
Yeah,
knows what
and
team
I'm
will be
I'm
on
just very
then?
confused about the Dobbs stuff. I mean, maybe Minnesota just like gave him an offer they couldn't refuse, but very confused there. Just confused about the whole thing. Arizona knows that they're bad, but I just we'll see. I think Clayton Tune starts this week, and we'll and I'm just zero interest everywhere.
Uh, what? What they even? Vikings traded 2024 sixth round pick. I mean, is a 2024 sixth round pick really the number that you want,
Who
or
knows?
the is
You can
that
say the same thing about Arizona beating Dallas. Why?
yeah. Yeah, for sure, for sure. All right. Anything else on this side? If not, let's talk about the Cleveland side, which is
Yeah, I
just as
mean, look,
confusing, by the way.
right? No, it is. So I would be a little bit more enticed if Michael Wilson did not play. He is
Okay,
not practicing. Didn't practice Wednesday. We'll see what happens today. Rondale Moore is really, really cheap. So that could be a potential option. Maybe opens McBride up. I don't know. But right now I have zero interest.
for sure. All right, let's talk about the other side. Like I mentioned, just as confusing over here with Deshaun Watson potentially giving it a go this week. Currently listed as like a game time decision here. We also don't know what's going to happen with Jerome Ford, who's dealing with an ankle injury right now. Could be the Kareem Hunt show once again. What do we think about? Let's talk about the quarterback situation first. Do we think Deshaun Watson actually has a chance of going this week?
Your guess is as good as mine, man. They look, it was very, very, I'm not touching this spot the rest of the season because of what they did to us 2 weeks ago, but gets cleared from concussion protocol, puts the helmet back on, and then they say you're just not playing. We're going to ride with PJ Walker, which is probably the most insulting thing a franchise can do, especially after you pay him $200 million guaranteed. So I don't really know what to expect here, and I have the spot's good. It's not bad. It's a really good spot, and I think that you have to have some Browns interest in it somewhere. It's just very unclear of what's going to happen this week. I think that despite whoever plays at quarterback, we can look at some stuff though. And I would say that Jerome Ford news is one of the more important things to look at this week.
Is this like a guy went to concussion protocol and then isn't getting inserted back in the game? Just the new word for like benching someone? Because we saw this
Yeah,
exact same move played out by the Falcons. Like it feels like
they did. Yeah, yeah.
it's the exact same thing. Like Desmond Ritter went to concussion protocol. Then after he was cleared by he decided not to bring him back in. I feel like this is a new polite way to say you just got benched. Go sit down.
Could be. And if that, I mean, that this game, I wish we could just trust more of it because I actually do think that the Cleveland side of things is actually really strong here. If Jerome Ford misses, I mean, Kareem Hunt vaults himself into a top 3 RB play.
Yeah, for sure. He definitely does. All right. Let's talk about the running back game a little bit. Like I said, Jerome Ford injured right now with an ankle injury. This feels like the more like solid spot. Like I think Kareem Hunt is not a bad option necessarily. What do you think about the spot for Kareem?
On FanDuel, like I said, if I'm not going to go as far as saying regardless if Ford plays or not, but I will say that he is a slam dunk if we get the spot where he is the RB1 in the spot and Ford doesn't play. If Ford does play, it is an ankle injury that I think could potentially hold him back a little bit, give Kareem Hunt some more rushing touches, and he scored 4 touchdowns in the last 3 games against at least 2 competent defenses. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that, the receiving work has gone to Pierre Strong, which is not ideal because I do think that Hunt should be used in both passing and rushing games. But if Jerome Ford is out, he's a slam dunk on FanDuel, and it would make things very difficult to choose between the two. And 5,500 on DraftKings would just be a slam dunk as well. It's a great spot. I think that you need somebody from this Browns team again. You just need some more clarity on the situation.
Yeah, you definitely need more clarity on the situation, and that's what we're going to have to wait for here. Anything else that you want to talk about here? I mean, a Cooper spot or an Elijah Moore spot, but I guess that kind of just depends on what this defense is going to give us. Or
Yeah,
not what this defense is going to give us, what this QB is going to give us in terms of is it going to be Deshaun or PJ?
I'd feel better with PJ at this point, honestly.
That's
I mean, that's where
so
we're at.
disrespectful. That's
I
so
know. I
disrespectful.
know.
Well, you're right. I'm not saying you're wrong. It's just it's crazy that this is the point we're at this point in the season.
I liked Deshaun Watson too. Like I really did.
Yeah.
And I thought he could have a huge bounce back season, but it is just I don't know, bad vibes. But for what it's worth, right now, maybe we should view Cleveland in this light as of right now. But like them winning today, and not even them winning this week, they are in the playoff spot right now, just straight
Yeah.
up in a playoff spot. So
Yeah.
defense has definitely won them stuff, but it is hard to ignore what Cooper did last week. Against a bad Seattle secondary. I think that again, the 2 times that we've rostered him this season, he's completely just not done well. So that definitely has a bias a little bit, but I still think Cooper and Moore are fine. And you got to see what happens with David Njoku right now. He is currently questionable with an ankle injury. He didn't practice. I will note that if you get a spot where PJ Walker is in at quarterback, his favorite target so far has been David Njoku.
Yeah, I could definitely get behind the David Njoku stuff potentially. Have to wait on that injury designation for sure, but I could definitely get behind that David Njoku spot. I already have him picked up in some of my fantasy leagues. I'm very happy about that too. All right, anything else in this game, Jared? If not, let's talk about some pick'em options.
Let's talk Pick'em. I doubt we get much here because we don't know the status of either quarterback.
For sure. All right, let's talk pick'em. I would assume the same thing, but let's at least take a look.
Yeah,
Cardinals, you get
I
some
don't even
Marquise
have any
Brown
game
numbers.
props. I don't even have any.
Yeah, I have Marquise Brown and Amari Cooper numbers, and that's it. So those aren't either things that I would take without knowing the QB situation. So I guess
Yeah,
we keep it moving.
fun game stack if things fall correctly.
Yeah, I can get behind that for sure. All right, let's move on into this next game. Second to last game of the 1 p.m. window. It is going to be the Washington Commanders facing off against the New England Patriots. Currently, the Patriots are coming in as 3-point favorites. Over under is at 41. Let's talk about this Commanders side first. Patriots are kind of all over the place, right? In terms of their defense, we've seen some good, we've seen some bad. We've also seen that the Commanders are just willing to let Sam Howell chuck this thing. And so, do we think the passing offense could get going here with Terry McLaurin and potentially Jahan Dotson taking a little bit of an increased role with Curtis Samuel potentially being out with that toe injury?
The last 4 weeks, we've seen the Patriots obviously lose some key pieces on defense, and they've given up the ninth most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. That number over the past 2 weeks has grown worse. They give up the fourth most to opposing wide receivers, which, by the way, quick note on the Browns situation from last game. The Browns are giving up the third most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers, so could be interesting to see how that happens for the last game. But again, Patriots trending in the wrong direction, giving up a lot here, and this plays in pretty perfectly to what the Commanders have been doing. Sam Howell, despite the amount of sacks that he's been giving up, which, is still an issue, the Commanders are second in the league in pass rate over expectation, right behind the Chiefs, which is obviously an Eric Bieniemy thing. 8.9% for the Chiefs, 8.7 for the Commanders. So getting very, very close to those numbers. Now you can argue that some of that is because they've had to they've been in back and forth games or game scripts that have mattered into where they've had to pass so much. But it does feel like you said, Sam Howell just having to chuck religiously here. He has so many 40 passing attempt games that it's hard to keep track of, and some really enticing numbers for tournaments. Unreliable in cash. We know that the floor can be single digits. It can also be in the low teens. So no, not going to go there, but the ceiling can be enticing. So it definitely is very solid for tournaments against this Patriots secondary. As far as weapons go, I don't mind Terry McLaurin for tournaments. Got to keep an eye on the Curtis Samuel stuff, like you said. Jahan Dotson finally getting there. Great week last week to have him on my bench. And I think that this is a spot where I am willing to go to some Washington Commanders, but probably not in cash. I think that it's tough to say whether or not you really trust the Brian Robinson game script stuff because he's so game script dependent. I don't really know which way I lean with that. I think you got to kind of wait to see what happens with the injuries. And Dotson could be a guy that is cash game viable if Samuel's out.
Yeah, I can definitely get behind the Dotson stuff. I think the upside's certainly there. I refuse to believe in the running back room here. I think with it says split up between Robinson and Gibson, it's tough sledding for. I don't think the game script's necessarily there. I don't think Washington necessarily has a commanding lead throughout this thing. I think it could be actually a pretty close game. Let's talk about.
So one more before we go over to the Patriots side. Terry McLaurin, disrespectful price tag on DraftKings. He is 5,600, and he has obviously double-digit targets in 2 of the last 3 weeks. Just missed it with 9 targets in week 7. The dude has, I understand he hasn't had a fantastic fantasy season, but he should not be at 5,600 on DraftKings.
Yeah, definitely should not be that cheap. A wide receiver, one of his caliber, is definitely in a pretty solid spot. All right, let's talk about the Patriots side. And Jared, I want to know, how excited are you to potentially have to play Demario Douglas in cash games this week?
Not super excited, but it actually probably will get more excited as the week goes on here. This is as clear of chalk as possible, and you're playing it. He's a blocker this week on all sites. No Kendrick Bourne, he's done for the season. Juju Smith-Schuster is basically non-existent. Devontae Parker is injured again, concussion protocol. They don't play Tyquan Thornton, and so you could see a grouping of wide receivers that is Demario Douglas, wide receiver 1, Juju. Depending on Devontae Parker being in or out, I don't think it matters. You're still playing Douglas, and they might even play Jalen Rieger, which, again, whatever. But I think that you just playing him this week, and he is the clear value at the receiver position. Will we see the Mac Jones chucking game? Potentially. I don't know. He hasn't had that outside of the first 2 weeks of the season. but it hasn't been all that bad the last 2 weeks. Like, I know that they lost a heartbreaker to Buffalo, but 2 passing touchdowns in both of the last 2 games.
Yeah, he's definitely looked a little bit more solid on the passing front, and you could definitely see some upside for him here against a Washington Commanders team that only got worse. I mean, they're going to have no pass rush now without Montez Sweat and Chase
Yep.
Young,
Also bad
and
vibes. Tank
yeah,
time.
also very very bad vibes right now. It's definitely tough sledding for this Commanders team, and this Commanders defense got way worse over the trade deadline. So I'm excited. I think you have to play Demario Douglas. I think game stacks allow you to play a Mac Jones type build with potentially a tight end here, and I think there's a lot of solid ways to go for this Patriots team this weekend.
Yeah, I saw something again, and this pains me so much, but Ramondre Stevenson's going to be owned in cash this week because of price and because of matchup. You're losing interior guys left and right here, and I think that the Patriots actually will be able to move the ball. I do not want to do it, but tell me why we're interested in Ramondre Stevenson in cash games.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's the same thing that we just said, right? Like, it's you lose Chase Young, who is one of the best run stoppers in the league, and was a big reason that defense could have any success against the run. You lose Montez Sweat again, another guy who can create pressure on the defensive line. The bad vibes, the Ramondre Stevenson spot is a spot where it's very similar to Rashad White. You know, I think he's getting touches taken away weekly from Ezekiel Elliott in terms of the rushing game, but he's always going to have that really safe receiving floor. And because of that, at 6,200, a cheaper price than Rashad White is in, I think the spot's really solid, man.
Patriots are home and favored. This is a
Oh,
spot
you
where
know what
I
that
think,
means.
yeah, I mean, they don't have very many opportunities like that, and I think this is a spot where you can see, like the spot against Vegas, like the rushing, just the actual like yards per touch is just so horrid for Ramondre Stevenson. But the work in the passing game is okay, and I think that maybe there's just enough here to say that we can play him at these price tags and hope the game script goes in his favor. But man, it's tough to really get a read on that situation. This is going to be a spot where you're going to have to play one of those spots for your running back position probably this week. Just kind of
Yeah.
have to hope it goes. Um, would you rather play Ramondre Stevenson or Bijan Robinson?
Oh, easily Ramondre Stevenson, without a doubt.
Oh, okay. Well, I think DraftKings
You
might
rather play
disagree with you
Bijan
here.
over Ramondre Stevenson?
I
That's
don't know.
wild.
I don't know. That's a question this week.
I think it soars to Ramondre Stevenson when you consider price tag too factored in, and I mean even if I
Oh,
don't know
they're
what their
very
price tag
close
is.
on DraftKings, by the way.
Well, it doesn't matter because Ramondre has the edge in terms of receiving. Like I think Ramondre gets more work in the passing game at the end of the day. Also, I think I lean Ramondre Stevenson, but man, I just can't. I just don't think you can trust Bijan in an Arthur Smith offense.
Yeah, that's kind of where we're at.
What a
It would
gross
make
thing to
things a
say.
lot easier in cash if we found out that Jerome Ford wasn't playing. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. What a gross thing to say. If I heard myself say this at the beginning of the season, be I'd be going crazy. I'd be like, why did I say
Yeah.
something like that? But yeah,
So
no,
you
it's
got to
definitely
find somebody that's in the low sixes on FanDuel that you can feel good about, and there will be a guy in the late window that is super gross. But again, that's where we're at this point of the year.
oh
So
great, super gross.
yeah,
That sounds
it's
fun.
it's very gross. But I think that Ramondre Stevenson's in play for cash at a certain level.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Anything else in this one, Jared? If not, let's talk about some pick'em options because I feel like this one might have some strong ones.
Yeah, I mean, I do hope that something some kind of news breaks in this game that helps us. It's an interesting game stack, and the fact that it is a total of 41. I was expecting 37, 36, but there's worlds where this game does have shootout potential, like
Yeah,
actual like passing shootout potential.
I definitely agree there. All right, let's talk about the Commanders here in terms of pick'em options. You get Terry McLaurin at 12.5 fantasy score, 59.5 receiving yards. You get Jahan Dotson at 40.5 receiving yards and 3.5 receptions. I wouldn't mind being early on this Jahan Dotson stuff compared to the field because I think Curtis Samuel does end up missing this week, and I don't mind getting to this Dotson number early because as soon as Samuel's out, this is getting closer to 50 and closer to 4.5 receptions.
Yeah, I can get behind that, and obviously this would help. I'm just very bullish this week on Sam Howell passing attempts at 34.5. I think there's worlds where they get down in this game and they have to throw the football, and the Patriots just have not. They keep trending downward, like we said. So I like the over passing yards for Sam Howell, 241.5. I like the over passing attempts, and I can get behind a lot of stuff on this offense. We'll be out on Brian Robinson this week.
Yeah, I think so too. All right, let's talk about the Patriots. Mac Jones, 217.5 passing yards. I don't mind it. I think it definitely could get there. I think I feel more comfortable though with Ramondre Stevenson. Uh, Probably receiving yards. I wouldn't mind taking a shot on Zeke rushing yards at 31.5. Like, he's been consistent enough in this offense that, especially with how Washington is going to have their run defense depleted a little bit more, I think Zeke could get to 31.5 pretty easily.
Yeah, I think that's okay. I think that I'm probably just taking a wait and see approach on some of this stuff, but it could be an interesting week. Like, how are they gonna? I guess this is where Ramondre Stevenson and Zeke both come into the fold for the entire DFS outlook here. I know we're all, jumping at the bit to play Demario Douglas, but there are worlds where this just doesn't work. Or maybe they're just able to find success on the ground with the two guys. And, I just don't, I don't know. There's a world where this is a stinker as well.
Yeah, I could definitely see it happening without a doubt, but I think you still have to play Demario just as a blocker, kind of like you said. But definitely can see worlds where they kind of just use the running game to eat clock and then get out of there.
Yeah, yeah. The rushing yard number looks pretty good for Stevenson, but at the same time, you look at the inefficiency and you're like, okay, well, that's pretty accurate priced. 21.5 receiving yards is all right. I just think you need to, probably have one that he breaks for a good 8 to 10 yards.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Anything else here in this game, Jared? If not, let's move on to the next one.
No. Move again. I like just to finish that game up. I'm a little back and forth on what I think could happen. Like, it could be a sneaky game stack that shoots out, but it also could be there could be definitely worlds where this thing ends like 17-13 and you just don't get the ceiling.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Let's talk about this next game, which is going to be the Seattle Seahawks facing off against the Baltimore Ravens. I think this is the one like saving grace of the 1 p.m. window, a game that actually looks pretty decent overall. In terms of watchability, Ravens are 6-point favorites. Over under is at 44. Let's talk about this Seahawks team first. Was a little bit more shootouty than I expected in their last game against the Cleveland Browns. But now they come in against a Baltimore defense that it's played great in this 1 p.m. window. I swear, every time I see them in the 1 p.m. window, they are just absolutely destroying some team. And at home, Seattle has to make the cross country travel in the 1 p.m. window as well. Like, I could definitely see spots where Baltimore covers this 6-point spread pretty easily. But let's talk about Seattle first and talk about this offense. What do you think about Geno Smith here in this matchup? And it's a really, really tough matchup all the way around when you face off against the Ravens right now.
Super tough matchup for Seattle in general. The cross country stuff is very concerning, and I think that man, I think that Baltimore that'll be my. I mean, I'll say it now. I think Baltimore wins pretty handily. I don't like the West Coast to East Coast thing, 3 time zones before the 1 p.m. start, and I know that Seattle has the means to look good, and I think that there's just a lot to dislike about the Geno Smith spot. Tyler Lockett potentially not going to be able to give it a go this week. So I'm pretty out on the entire situation for the Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah, don't blame you. I'm right there with you. I'm pretty out on the Seattle Seahawks as well. But let's talk about the Baltimore Ravens here. Is Lamar a potential pay up candidate for cash games this week?
Yeah, he's definitely in the conversation, and I think that hindsight's always 2020, Josh. And so we were talking about Lamar versus Hurts, and obviously the entire field just loaded up on Lamar against the Arizona Cardinals, and Gus Edwards got all the touchdowns. So it was, and then Jalen Hurts goes off for like 35 fantasy points. Um, so yeah, hindsight's always 2020 there, but you get Lamar back in this spot against a Seattle offense or a Seattle defense that's giving up the most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers most recently, and some of the worst secondary stuff that we've seen. And so I think that you can say that Lamar is in a very good spot. And I think that the offense still runs through him, and Gus Edwards dealing with an injury, and also the Seattle defense against the run has been pretty good this year. So I think it is a clear pathway to Lamar being a really good fantasy option. I'll still probably side with Jalen Hurts, and I'll explain why in a little bit. But I do think that Lamar is a candidate for cash once again. Don't let he's gonna have this is gonna happen sometimes where he's gonna have really really good spike weeks where he gets all of the touchdowns, and there will be times where like last week where he just they give him situations where Gus Edwards gets multiple touchdowns. So unfortunately that's just the way things go. But I think that Lamar Jackson's in for a very very good week against Seattle.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think he is in for a really good week against Seattle. I think there's a lot of upside here. Are you willing to pair him with any weapons, whether it be Zay Flowers or Mark Andrews or someone else?
I don't think you necessarily have to have Mark Andrews. I think you can get most of that through Jackson if you wanted to go that direction. He's fine in tournaments. Uh, Zay Flowers, though, definitely can be a cash game option, maybe more so on FanDuel where he is 6,100. Probably just a few, close to a few $100 too short there. I know he fell pretty short last week with the 4 FanDuel points. That's not ideal. But you see it's a spot where like the box score total fantasy points don't look great, but you see the targets, you see some of the production. He's just missing touchdowns, and so that's why his price tag is where it is. But I think it's a solid spot. I think that Zay Flowers is like a top 5 wide receiver play, price adjusted.
Yeah, I can get behind that. Definitely 6,100. I mean, as bad as that last week was for him, it was only 4.4 FanDuel points. It did really help out his price tag to be super depreciated. And I think this is definitely a spot you could go to. All right, anything else here? If not, let's talk about some pick'em stuff.
I will say this gets a little bit more interesting depending on what happens with Tyler Lockett and Odell Beckham. Beckham didn't practice. It was pretty insane that he got pretty roughed up in that game against Arizona and didn't necessarily have to come back because they controlled the game. But that would be an interesting injury to monitor. That would send probably Rashad Bateman up into a wide receiver 2 role that we could feel decently comfortable about. But then Tyler Lockett would be the major injury here where I think that you would just have to play DK Metcalf or Jackson Smith and Jigba. You have to play one of them, and that would open up some value there. Tyler Lockett usually ends up ends up trying to make it through and ends up playing hurt and stuff like that. But this one is it's tough to read. I think that he will be DNP most of the week, and we'll have to see what Friday brings. But it's not a good spot, and I don't love doing it. But it would be such a massive target share for DK Metcalf that I think it'd be pretty impossible to ignore.
Yeah, for sure. I think it would be pretty impossible to ignore. I think the jump that we've seen from Jackson Smith and Jigba has been really solid as well. So I think it's something that you could rely on pretty heavily if Tyler Lockett ends up being out. All right, let's move on to pick'em stuff. Talk about the Ravens first. I really like Lamar 1.5 pass rush receiving touchdowns. I just feels really really low. I especially like his fantasy score being 20.5. Like it's very not going to be many options where he gets to 20.5 and he doesn't get to over 1.5 pass rush receiving touchdowns. So I can get behind that. What else do you like here though for this game?
Yep. I mean, I don't get that luxury on Underdog, but I certainly will play it on PrizePicks. I agree with you. Like, we played the fantasy score last week. I'd still go back to it this week too. I think that the spot is solid, and maybe Seattle brings a little bit more of a pushback than the Cardinals did last week. So yeah, I think that that's fine. I don't have much interest in anything else. Zay Flowers is like the most accurately priced wide receiver that the market has, and I just don't like trusting in that. So I will fade that. Um, not much to play in this game right now. If you wanted to get a little bit bullish on this and go with the DK Metcalf 58.5 receiving yards in the event Lockett is not fully 100% or just doesn't play at all, that's where you would try to jump on that early.
Yeah, for sure. I could definitely see you jumping on that early if you really do think that Tyler Lockett's going to be sitting with this hamstring injury. All right. Anything else here, Jared? If not, let's move on.
Let's move on.
Let's do it. Let's talk about this next game, which is going to be the Colts facing off against the Panthers. This is the start of the 4 p.m. window. Currently, we have the Panthers at 2-point underdogs at home. Over under is at 44. Let's talk about this Colts team. We've been talking about a really strong running back room or running back position this week, and it feels like Jonathan Taylor kind of finds himself close to the top here. Really, really great matchup against this Carolina team that has been one of the worst run defenses in the NFL. Taylor's work has been slowly ramping up. I think he fell a little bit short against the Saints because they just needed to throw the ball at the end of that game. But I think in this spot where they should end up winning here, I think the Jonathan Taylor spot's really solid. So give me your thoughts and what you like and what you don't like about Jonathan Taylor this week.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of surprised to see him or them in general be able to run on the Saints in general. Like
Yeah.
that's a tough matchup, and usually something we avoid. And so you get this spot this week where, I don't love the price tag just already adjusting itself, and but it is a spot where I think that it's really enticing to play. I would side with Josh Jacobs personally. We'll talk about that spot soon, but the spot for Jonathan Taylor is strong. It would be great, but Zach Moss, unfortunately, is still there and getting touches and scoring touchdowns. So I think that Jonathan Taylor on DraftKings at 6,400 is a fine option as well. We probably take that over Bijan. Man, that's tough to say. But again, we are here in week 9. So I think that Taylor is definitely in the mix to be a guy that it's definitely owned and for good reason. And I think that, as long as Anthony Richardson's not quarterback for this team, they will run the football religiously.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely agree with that. Definitely could see Jonathan Taylor getting a good chunk of work this week. I think, like I said last week, I think he really he only got 12 touches because of the fact that they were just down and they had to throw the ball a lot there at the end of that game. But I think if they're up consistently, you could see Taylor get 20 touches and you could see Moss get 12 to 15 touches. And I wouldn't be shocked about this team running the ball 30 plus times. It's kind of going to be the norm if they're going to be winning games. Let's talk about the receiving room. I know we said that, we like the spot in terms of the running room, but it does get a little bit tougher when you talk about pass catchers against this Carolina team who has been pretty solid overall. What do you think about the passing game, and do you think it can get started here against the Panthers?
It's not a clear pass run funneling towards the run. Like the Panthers' run defense is pretty much dead last, which kind of it gives me nostalgic vibes from like 5 years ago where that was a thing. And so it's become a thing again, and they've been decent in defending the pass. I don't think the Colts really have to pass that much in this game to win. So I think that I'm probably fine staying off Downs and Pittman. They're really fun when you get spots that have pass funnels and the ability for them to really get going, like we saw last week with Josh Downs. I think that you're probably just fading it and you're playing JT. Zach Moss, really nice tournament play. But one more thing, I have zero interest in the passing game for Indy, but I on FanDuel tend to lean towards some other running backs. On DraftKings, I think that Jonathan Taylor probably, after looking over it again a little bit more, he's probably a top 3 play.
Yeah, I can get behind that. All right. Anything else on this side? If not, let's talk about the Panthers.
Let's talk about the Panthers because, honestly, somewhat interesting here.
Is it another week of just playing Adam Thielen and forgetting about it? Because we continue to
Yeah.
see the guy just absolutely tear teams to shreds, continue to see consistent targets. He's only had 1 week over the past 5 where he hasn't had 10 plus targets. I know last week was a little bit disappointing against Houston, but I mean, in PPR sites, it looked a lot better. I know the price tag's pretty high, but what do you think about this Adam Thielen spot overall?
Spot for Thielen's really solid, man. The price tag continues to go up, which probably keeps me off of it on FanDuel, but on DraftKings at 7,500, I think he is firmly in play there. And he is also a much, not even price. I mean, that's a big reason, but the fact that he is able to get the PPR points as well as the 100-yard bonuses when they happen, that's huge for DraftKings. And 3 games over 30 fantasy points for Thielen is very, very, very strong. So last week, kind of a dud when you look back at the entire season. And I think that the price just hasn't caught up for what this is. On FanDuel, the price is caught up. On DraftKings, he probably should be in the 8K range.
Yeah, definitely should be in the 8K range. That is for sure. We got the report last week that Chuba Hubbard was going to kind of take over this backfield, and I think you relatively saw that play out. What do you think about Chuba this week, and is he a potential option against a Colts team that just hasn't done much defensively this year?
Yeah, they the Colts over the last month have allowed the third most opposing or fantasy points to opposing running backs. You saw Chuba now 15 rushing attempts. Sounds like an RB1 workload to me. He's not going to be too involved in the passing game. And I think that that's just going to be a thing. They're probably not going to have too many running back targets anyway. So I do think that Chuba is a pretty strong candidate. I mean, he's 5,000 on DraftKings. On FanDuel, where he comes in at 6,500, it's also a general range where I'm interested. But I think that there's a lot more options on FanDuel that maybe you don't have to go this direction, but it's a good spot. So if they really want to, if they're telling the truth and they really lean into Chuba Hubbard getting close to 18 touches, I mean, it's in play. It's cash game play.
Yeah, I would agree. Definitely a cash game play. Man, do they have to feel stupid for signing Miles Sanders to that 3-year deal?
Doesn't look great.
Just go does not look good at this point in time.
Look,
All right,
so Sanders got
go
2
ahead.
rushing attempts last week. 2.
I know, I know.
And didn't do anything
It's
with them.
looking bad.
So
It's bad. It's getting worse and worse as the week goes on. Yeah, I'm fine with staying away from the Miles Sanders spots. Obviously, anything else on this game and this side of the ball? If not, we'll move over to pick 'em stuff.
Not really. Both tight ends are dealing with their own things. Hayden Hurst, the illness, Kylan Granson's in concussion protocol. Those are tournament plays that we'll find out what happens with that. But this is a really, really fun game stack, and the entire afternoon window is very, very interesting for fantasy.
Yeah, definitely is. All right, let's talk about some game stack stuff. On the Panther side, we will start out over there. Chuba Hubbard, 45.5 rushing yards. Adam Thielen, 68.5 receiving yards. I could see you taking either one of these ones and feeling good about it.
Yeah, love the Thielen stuff. I know that the Colts have been a little bit better in the secondary than they are in the run game, but I really like what Thielen brings to the table here, and I'm just going to probably continue to keep playing it until the market adjusts. It's going to be a thing all season, and this is probably one of those games like Carolina's coming off a win. They're not going to have too many options to win games. This is definitely going to be one where I think there's shootout potential, and we've seen the Colts in a lot of shootout games the past 2 seasons and even this year as well.
Yeah, for sure. On the other side with the Colts, Jonathan Taylor, 64.5 rushing yards. Sign me up, sir. I like it. I like it a lot.
Yep, I'll take both running backs on either side, not the Zach Moss part, but 46.5 rushing yards for Chuba is ridiculously low. And then on the other side, yeah, Jonathan Taylor, 64.5 rushing yards is really strong there. I could even bet on a touchdown if it was given to me. That's it though. I think that we're good on that. But yeah, Taylor on one side, Thielen on the other makes for a really good correlation.
For sure. All right. Let's move on into the next game, Jared. It's going to be the Giants facing off against the new Raiders. Raiders are 1 point favorites. Over unders at 37.5. Let's talk about this Giants side before we get into all the Raiders madness that's going on right now. We got the news that we're not expecting Tyrod Taylor to play this week. We're expecting Daniel Jones back as the starting QB. We also got the news that Saquon's dealing with this ankle injury. He was limited at the Giants' first practice so far this week. Let's talk about Daniel Jones. What do you expect this to mean for this offense as a whole?
Well, I don't know if I can confidently say that the floor of the offense gets risen here because Tyrod was able to kind of do some stuff. Look, I know that the Giants game was awful and like unwatchable. This one should be a little bit better. There's some leaky stuff on either defensive side, so I like I like Daniel Jones. I think that as long as he is good to go, I know that the non-contact stuff has been a thing, and we are scared of that for sure. And obviously the floor has been awful, but you look at some of the teams the Giants have played, and it's just a murderer's row of defenses. So
Hmm.
I think that Jones on DraftKings at 5,600 is what I said at the earlier part of the podcast, an option in cash to allow you to get the running backs that you really, really want on the slate. You're not really able to play everybody you want if you go the Jalen Hurts route on DraftKings or Lamar on DraftKings. So Daniel Jones does fit the cash game mindset on DraftKings, and he does give you, at least hopefully, I think, a rushing floor here of about 3 to 4 points. Obviously, there are concerns here. He only has 2 passing touchdowns on the season, lots of turnovers. So that, there's a lot of red flags here, but he is facing the Vegas defense that I think he can do something with. So yeah, not ideal situation. Also, we know that Darren Waller is not playing this week, which came out before the podcast. So definitely not ideal there, right? But I think that we have some things to look forward to for the Giants.
Yeah, for sure. I think that there definitely are some things to look forward to. How are you handling the running back room? Are you expecting Saquon to play this week?
I'm expecting Saquon to play. He was limited on Wednesday, and that's a good sign for him. So I expect him to play. I think he'll be fine. And having him, if Barkley is unable to go, then I will. Then you have to still have some interest here. I was going to say then the whole thing kind of falls apart at the seams, but Barkley will help Daniel Jones tremendously with the floor and ceiling upside that he would have in that spot. And I also think that if Saquon doesn't play, then you're playing Matt Breida, and he's probably one of the best running back plays of the week. But I expect Barkley to go here. I also expect Wan'Dale Robinson to go here with the knee injury, and he was limited on Wednesday as well. And I know that things have looked awful from this for 2 weeks straight now, but again, you get to face the Raiders in a dome, and I like the outlook of that brings. And no Darren Waller means that a good 20% of targets need to go somewhere. And Wan'Dale Robinson sitting at 3,500 on DraftKings because of those 2 terrible weeks. Daniel Jones, very very much different from Tyrod, where Tyrod wasn't really looking at anybody but Darren Waller, and now that he's out and Daniel Jones is quarterback, I think things go back to the Wan'Dale Robinsons.
Yeah, I could get excited about Wandale again, and I think the spot is pretty solid. Are you expecting anyone to take over Waller's spot at the tight end position? Because we know he's going to end up missing this week due to that hamstring injury. Is a guy like Daniel Bellinger at a really cheap price tag something that intrigues you?
I mean, I don't think it's. Maybe it turns into something that people will play in cash. I don't think it's 100% necessary, but it could allow you to get up to an AJ Brown if you wanted to do that, or a CD Lamb in the more competitive game that's after this one, or even a Devontae Adams. It could allow you to do that, but I don't know. At this point, I think he would be in the cash game player pool specifically because of price. Like, that is pretty ridiculous, but don't expect the world of that. 2,500 on DraftKings, 4,300 on FanDuel. It's really just Bellinger and Cager, and Cager's going to be used more in the run scheme. Chris Myrick's already out, so they are really thin at that position. And that's probably why I would just say I'd rather play Wan'Dale Robinson, but that's kind of where we're at. And so, just based on price, I think Bellinger is in play, but don't expect anything more than like 5 fantasy points from that.
For sure, I can definitely get behind it. All right, let's talk about the other side and talk about this Raiders team that is new and improved. Hopefully, Jimmy G to the bench. Aiden O'Connell is most likely going to start. We also had Josh McDaniels fired, and that is now going to end up being Antonio Pierce's team as the head coach. And we had the GM fired as well. So whole new look Raiders. What do we expect from them this week, Jared?
Well, I don't have the numbers on hand, but we do see, at least in the NBA, and I think sometimes in the NFL too, that teams that basically have like a complete overhaul, coaching change. It's rare that a GM and a head coach get fired in the same week. Also, the offensive coordinator
Yeah.
got fired too. So it's a whole mess of everything. And happy birthday, Jimmy G. You're benched. By the way, it's his birthday today.
Yeah.
The Raiders
The Raiders
made a
social
social
media.
post and said happy
Yeah.
birthday, Jimmy G. And I'm like, dude, why? Who approved this? You should
Read
be
the
fired.
room, brother. Read the room.
Yeah. So it's one of those things where like Aiden O'Connell's going to be the starting quarterback here, and he should probably be the starting quarterback the rest of the season. Injuries aside, I don't really know what to expect from this, but I would say that the one true piece that we could potentially rely on, and again, potentially relying on things is tough with the Raiders because this has not worked out every time I've said it this year. But if this is the Josh Jacobs week? Question mark. He's 7,500
It's
on
just
FanDuel,
screw.
6,900 on DraftKings. He says the offense isn't his fault, which I don't know. It was kind of hilarious to see that. Bad vibes all the way around, but this is a really good matchup against the Giants, and I think that he is one of the stronger cash game plays of the week.
Yeah, I'm laughing over here because I feel like we've said this a few times now, and the
A couple
fact that
times.
it's just, yeah, it usually doesn't work out for us, but I hope it does here. I think it could definitely work here. The price tag feels low. I think that the locker room should be pretty invigorated by the new head coach. So, um, I don't know. It should be a good situation. I think that Jacobs could definitely have some upside here, and I certainly don't mind the price tag that's attached to him as well. I think that's the main selling point for me.
Right. Well, let's hope that they are. Technically, it's close to a pick 'em actually. Like a neutral site would say the Giants would actually be favored in this game, which kind of tells you everything you need to know. But I do think that cash games this week revolves around you playing one of Adams or Jacobs in it, and it could be site dependent. But right now, I lean with Jacobs.
For sure. Definitely can get behind that. All right. Let's talk about Devonte Adams. Any interest in Devonte Adams with Aiden O'Connell there?
Yeah, I mean the box score doesn't look good, right? But
Oh,
the watching the game and watching film from that game tells you that Jimmy G missed him on two wide open 60-yard touchdowns, and so this could look a lot different in the event that he catches those and they weren't overthrown. So. O'Connell definitely, he looked great in the preseason, didn't look great in the start against the Chargers. His day got saved because he got the rushing touchdown. So I don't know what to expect here necessarily, which is why I kind of want to be. I don't want to necessarily be associated with the QB performance to enable a good fantasy day. So that's why I side with Jacobs and Cash. And I think that Adams is a really good tournament pivot off of that. I struggle here. I struggle liking anything outside of Jacobs. I think Adams is solid, and that's as far as I'll go with it.
yeah, I can get behind that. All right, pick 'em. Let's talk about the pick 'em side of things if you're ready to.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
All right, Giants up first. Never mind. No Giants numbers for me at least. Do you have any Giants numbers that you like?
Yeah, well, I'll look for a Daniel Jones number closer to the weekend with the fantasy number. If it's anywhere like, I think they'll probably price this pretty low. So if it's somewhere around 15 or something like that, I'll gladly take that. Uh, I'm very curious and hesitant to see if he'll be as mobile as he has been in the past when he's been healthy. But I like Barkley rushing receiving touchdown. I can get behind that. If there was a Wandale Robinson reception number, I'd be down with that as well. Remember, the A dot is not great for Wandale, so probably going to stay away from anything that's not receptions. And that'll be it for my Giants exposure.
For sure. Let's talk about the other side. I think Jacobs at 73 and a half receiving, man. I mean, or rushing, sorry, rushing yards. That's just a really high number. Like, are you getting excited about that number?
Don't necessarily get excited, but it's a good spot. I think that the touch count will be there for him. I think that they'll give him 18 to 20 touches. If you look at the game plan of what they tried to do in the Chargers game, you saw that he was very, very heavily used in the passing game. And that was a spot where O'Connell was just dumping it off to him. And it was some of the most impressive numbers that he's had in the passing game this season. If we see that again, then I would be more willing to take a rush receiving number from Josh Jacobs. I would be able to take some stuff in the passing game, maybe too. I know that we're still not used to seeing Josh Jacobs as a pass catcher, but they have looked, they've definitely evolved that role for him this season. They have not really given Amir Abdullah that look, and Zamir White doesn't play. So I would say you look at a rush receiving number for Josh Jacobs, and that's what I would gladly take first.
Yeah, I agree. I think this rushing number is a little crappy with how high it is. I mean, he's covered it once this season. He barely covered it in that game too. against the Patriots. So I don't know, rough sledding there. It's such a high number, and I think I'd stay away from everything else. So do you have any interest in another number there?
I don't have much here. I'd be curious to see what a Devonte Adams reception line would look like because I think that the market would price it a little bit too low for what I think it should be. I know that he wasn't necessarily. Oh no, he had a great game against the Chargers. Just didn't score. I mean, a great game by this season's standards, not necessarily
Yeah.
his standards, but still got 13 targets against the Chargers, and that was when I mean, like Jacoby Myers has been a thing all season. So I think that Adams will just based around the news and based around like I don't know. They have a new OC, which by the way, one of our guys on staff gladly pointed out to me that their new OC was a guy that was under Adam Gase. So that is not great. But at the same time, I think that there's extra motivation for this Raiders team this week, and I think we will see somewhat of a new scheme employed.
Yeah, I think that you will see at least a little bit of new things here and there, but I don't know if it'll change all that much. But we'll
Well,
have to
more
wait and
so
see.
like just demanding Adams more involvement is what I'm trying to
Yeah,
say.
more star player involvement. I can definitely get behind that. All right, let's talk about this last game on the slate, Jared, if you're ready to move on to it.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, last game up is going to be the Philadelphia Eagles facing off against the Dallas Cowboys. Currently, the Eagles come in as 3-point favorites. Over-under is at 47. This is game of the week, at least on the main slate, in the 1 p.m. and 4 p.m. windows. Let's talk about the Dallas side first. We've seen So this is a tough thing to talk about because we've seen the passing game really get exposed when it comes to Philadelphia's defense. We've seen teams be able to throw up a lot of passing yards. I feel that's a lot of game script production, though. Like I
Yeah.
feel like that's mostly because teams are down heavy and they have to throw the ball.
Mm-hmm.
So how are you judging these numbers when it comes to guys like CD Lamb and Dak Prescott? Because obviously they will throw the ball, but I'm not sure they have a lot of success with it.
I think that this will be. Man, it's tough because like the Cowboys have just not played uh, in games that aren't ending in blowouts, right? So we haven't had much of a sample size to kind of determine what that is. But you're right; like teams have been able to throw on Philly. A little bit of it feels game script dependent, but at the same time, like they've been successful doing it, I guess. So like the Vikings were able to throw on them. The Dolphins had some success here and there. Who else was there? Tampa Bay was in that mix as well. So in Washington twice now. So it's like I think that there's worlds where Dallas will just have to throw a bunch. So I think that the viability is certainly there. And it's not like the Eagles. I mean, the Eagles have a really good run defense, but I think injuries are keeping them at bay in terms of the passing game exposure. So we've seen wide receiver ones get shut down from the Eagles, and they really struggle defending the wide receiver two and tight end positions, which could be something to take a look at. I think CD Lamb is still a strong tournament option. Just kind of just concerns me with the cash stuff. I know that says the 32 opponent ranking, but they have been a lot better to wide receiver ones. So I would say that CD Lamb is a fine tournament play. I probably will lead, and this is maybe this is contrarian, maybe it isn't. I don't know, but give me AJ Brown in this game over anybody again. So I don't know in terms of taking it back to the Cowboys. Maybe that does scheme things open for Brandon Cooks. Got to keep an eye on Michael Gallup. He is currently sick with an illness. He returned to practice today, which is good, but we'll see if he's able to go here. I guess we'll see if that's a thing. I am okay siding with Jake Ferguson here. I think that in cash, at least on FanDuel, I think you're playing a tight end from this game, and for good reason. I think that both tight end spots are really good. And I think that you got to have some interest in something from this Dallas side because if you're playing Hurts and you're interested in AJ Brown and some of these other options here for Philly, you'd want them and expect them to get pushed a little bit. So I definitely think that Dallas exposure is necessary. So I'll let you give your passing thoughts on this, and then we can talk about the real fun Tony Pollard situation.
Yeah, I agree with you in terms of a few things. Number one, that like AJ Brown is the number one target from this game. I just think that the workload is insane right now. I think honestly, it's one of the best in the NFL. So like, I really like the AJ Brown spot, but beyond that, I really like your take on Ferguson. I think you continue to attack tight ends against this team, and it's worked out really well. And we saw him really involved last week too against the Rams. So I think
Yep.
that most likely continues. I wouldn't mind taking a shot on CD Lamb. Like I think the spot's pretty solid. I think you saw a lot of involvement last week against the Rams, and I think it's we've also seen some pretty consistent work from him this year, especially in these games where they have to step it up a little bit. So I like the CD Lamb spot. I think there's a lot of upside, but let's talk about this Tony Pollard situation because you're getting him at 6,600. It's a dirt cheap price tag. We've been waiting on the touchdown for 8 weeks now, Jared. 7 weeks now. Is week 9 the week that we finally see Tony Pollard score a rushing touchdown?
Yeah, this is probably my worst take of the offseason. And I know a lot of people were on this, but I was very, very heavy on Tony Pollard. And Dallas has just been involved in so many blowouts in either direction that it's kind of mind blowing to take a look at his entire season and say like what went wrong here. Uh, I think that it's interesting because the price tag is where it is. He's 6,600 on the Dallas Cowboys, where this is the most intriguing game of the week. It's the highest team total on the main, or it's the highest game total on the main slate. And so you have to have somewhat of interest here, but at the same time, the Eagles have been so good at stopping the run. Can Pollard get there in the passing game? We've seen it a few times where he has been able to. It's a really tricky spot, and at 6,600, I think it's so one. A part of me wants to say I want as many pieces of this game as possible, but number two also says there are guys that could be in better spots that just sound gross on paper, like Kareem Hunt, like Ramondre Stevenson, like a few others that we've mentioned throughout the course of the show. I don't know what to do with it. I don't know, but I know that Tony Pollard will be super owned on FanDuel.
Yeah, he'll be super owned. Again, it kind of, I want to say it comes down to like a blocker play almost, but like, I don't know, man. It's really tough. Like, you
Kind
can
of
get really
does.
scorched by this spot because, like, he could very well just be so involved that he gets a couple touchdowns and you're pretty screwed. I don't know. It's a really cheap price tag. It's really hard to make a determination on it. It might
Right
just
now,
come
I
down to
side
like
with
builds
playing him on
later in the week.
FanDuel, and then on DraftKings, I think you go Jacobs over him.
Okay, I can get behind that. I think that's a solid way to take things. Uh, Anything else you want to talk about on this Cowboys side? If not, let's talk about the Philadelphia side.
No, let's talk about the other side in Philly because that's obviously, I think, on paper, it's not the best spot on the slate, but game environment, such concentrated volume, you kind of have to just not force yourself to play it, but it's definitely nearing that direction this week.
Yeah, and especially, we kind of teased it already. When it comes to AJ Brown, the spot's going to be electric. There's really good upside here. He's such a big target in terms of him getting the receptions when they need it most. The receiving yards are insane right now. Over 125 in each of the last 6 games, Jared. I mean,
Yeah.
that's ridiculous. And then you've had multiple games with double digit targets too. He's been that guy. It's been huge. Do you pair? I know you were talking about it earlier in the show. Now that we've kind of talked through a whole slate, how are you feeling about pairing him up with Jalen Hurts as your pay up QB?
Yeah, I mean, I think you do it on FanDuel. This also is a point to where we said at the beginning of the show, but there's no Bills, there's no Bengals, there's no Chiefs, there's no Miami Dolphins, and so things are really scattered. No Buffalo, so like there's no real competition necessarily outside of Lamb and Cup, and we talked about Adams too. AJ Brown's just one of the best plays on the slate because of the unreal usage, but also just the fact that we just don't have any other options to play.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think the fact that you don't have any other options to play is definitely a reason you can lean towards this Jalen Hurts side of things. And I mean, the upside is certainly there. I'd be curious to see in the past how he's done against this Cowboys team. But I would assume it can't be that bad. Like, here, let's go take a look actually real quick,
Yeah.
unless you have it in
Um,
front of you.
Talking about Jalen, he's the most expensive quarterback on both sites. I think that it's a story on two different sites really. Like on FanDuel, I think you play him because he is just so involved with the touchdowns and obviously the tush push stuff. But trying to limit how many times we say tush push on this podcast. So uh,
Brotherly shove.
yeah, I know, right? So I think that he is he's just the best play at quarterback on FanDuel because of the amount of touchdowns that he is able to score with this team. And I think, tough matchup against Dallas, but Philly is an elite offense. So I would say this game has pathways to shoot out tremendously. And, I just think it's a no brainer play this week where I think, on a site like DraftKings, you can just use AJ Brown to get the Jalen Hurts exposure. That kind of just hedges you towards it's very hard to play Hurts and Kamara and AJ Brown and potentially another solid running back on DraftKings. That's kind of just where you're at this week. So that's why I kind of lean towards Daniel Jones, just trying to get to 20 points. But again, it's early in the week. Value may open. But yeah, if Hurts is, if you're able to get to Hurts on DraftKings, I will just play that. But as FanDuel touchdown heavy scoring system, I'll gladly play him over there. But yeah, I think that you have to play one, if not two, Eagles and on both sites. And so it's not really that's kind of like the chalk no brainer answer, but that's kind of how I'm approaching it at the moment. Again, that can change. You can also kind of talk yourself into playing potentially two Eagles pass catchers, mainly Dallas Goedert, if you wanted to go there with the Hurts stuff and cash. I know that kind of feels like a stretch a little bit, but how do you feel about that?
No, I could definitely see it working out for you. I think that I want exposure to this game. Like you mentioned, it's the best in game environment on the slate, so it's hard not to like as many pieces as you can get from it. I don't mind going Goddard. I think I'd rather have Ferguson, but in tournaments, I think Goddard is just fine.
Yeah, they're pretty close in price on FanDuel. I get going either direction. Ferguson's definitely not going to get as much volume as Goddard is, but Goddard, kind of falls victim to like AJ Brown's big games. So that was more so of me trying to just capture all the touchdowns. And we haven't really talked about DeAndre Swift yet, but over the last 4 weeks, Dallas has given up the fourth most fantasy points to opposing running backs. Could be an interesting tournament swerve there where I don't think, I say he's not going to be low owned. He will be probably like the fifth or sixth least owned player on this game, but he will be just because of this game environment. People will see the obvious AJ Brown, Jalen Hurts stuff, and they'll say Swift is a good tournament play with like the CD Lamb bring back.
Yeah, I can definitely get behind it. Man, that's shocking that the Cowboys are so bad against the running back position
Yeah,
over
it
these
is kind
past
of
four
shocking.
weeks. Yeah, did not expect to see that. All right, anything else in this game, Jared? If not, let's move on to pick 'em stuff and get this thing squared away.
No, let's go ahead and move on. And also, by the way, I'm pretty sure that number is super inflated because of Christian McCaffrey,
Ah, that makes
right?
sense.
It should
That
be.
makes sense. Was it? I mean, was
And I
that four
think
weeks ago
Austin
now?
Eckler as well.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely the Austin Eckler side of things. All right, let's talk about the Cowboys side of things for Prize Picks and Underdog. I think that I don't know. Ferguson at 33 and a half receiving yards is fine. I think Prescott will be forced into a situation where he's going to have to throw the ball, so 250 and a half passing yards is fine. Anything jump off the page here for you?
Yeah, I like that stuff. I'm a little bit unsure of what I want to do with CD Lamb, but I do agree that some of the other receiving options are just going to have to be more involved here for Dallas. So I am okay with the Jake Ferguson stuff. I would look for a fancy number for Ferguson because of the touchdown equity. He was able to get there very, on the first drive last week because of that. So that's where I would look first. Uh, I would love to believe in something with Tony Pollard. I just probably will end up fading that and hoping that he does something on FanDuel to get him there. But yeah, I like the passing yard stuff for Prescott as well. And I also think that you can take a look at anything related to Brandon Cooks too. I know that's not great, and he hasn't really shown upside necessarily, but I think that this week could be the one that does that.
I can get behind that. Let's talk about the Eagles here. I really like AJ Brown over 80 and a half receiving yards. I could get behind Swift, 56.5 rushing yards. I actually rather have a combo number there, if anything. Jalen Hurts, I don't know, 29.5 rushing yards is fine. I don't think I would take 1.5 passing touchdowns. I don't think I would take 250.5 passing yards. I don't know. I guess we'll get into this in just a second, but like it all depends on how you see this game playing out. Because if you see this game staying close and it kind of being back and forth, then this is a completely different situation. I could definitely see the Eagles just controlling this game and just kind of barely winning it, but kind of just running out clock like they do with other teams.
Yeah, I'm a little bit unsure as well. How much Dallas will be able to push them. I do think that I think this will be a candidate to potentially go under, but a very, very close under. I think this game ends like 24-20 Eagles. So the under hits, but they cover the spread, something like that. But in that world, you do think that Dallas does enough. Like, if does Dallas scoring 20 points uh, give you some kind of positivity there?
Yes, I think Dallas scoring 20 points does give me some type of positivity there. I'm
That's
not sure how
yeah,
much.
that kind of helps. Like, that's kind of where I'll have them sit this week. And if they score 20 points, then I think that pushes the Eagles enough to move the football and be more aggressive. By the way, this year the Eagles are seventh or eighth in the NFL pass rate over expectation, which is a number that I did not expect to see. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think that they will just kind of play their style of football. But I do think that they have been a little bit more pass happy recently. Maybe that stops this week, but um, man, I this is a very strange line to put AJ Brown at. Not gonna lie, like 81 and a half receiving, 6 receptions. You have to feel really bullish on it coming in. Is it a trap?
Mm, feels a little trappy. I'm not gonna lie. Would have expected it in the 90s, honestly. But yeah, I feel like it is a little trappy, to be honest with you.
I don't know how to feel.
Do you
My
just take it
heart.
anyway?
I think you just take it
I
anyway. That's how I want to
Yeah.
approach it. I know that's not like I don't know. This is kind of a if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of situation. And
Yep.
if you expect Dallas to score 20 points, and I think the Eagles win this game, AJ Brown will have to be pushed. And I love playing him in these kinds of games. And Miami was the same situation where I was like, you're just hammering this AJ Brown spot, and look what happened. We saw since that Minnesota game where he was like pouting on the sideline, he has been just electric since then. So I don't think it stops this week.
Last year, 103 receiving yards in the last game of the season, 67 receiving yards in the first game of the season with a touchdown. So take that for what it is worth on the AJ Brown side of things. But that was his yardage last year. I think I might wait out for a fantasy score number. That might be, if it's anything south of 20, I would take it.
Yeah, on a PPR side, I would agree with you. Yeah, I mean, like
Yeah,
he'll probably sit around 15, 16 on underdog, and at 9K, you need him to get that number.
yeah, for sure. You definitely do. All right, Jared, we're at the end of the show. Let's do what we usually do. We run through the games, we predict some scores. Uh, I'll change it up this week. I want you to guess the score for the Dolphins and Chiefs game first because I'm excited to talk about this one. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun to watch Sunday morning.
Yeah, so I didn't mention it early, but I will be going to the Rams Packers game, but not going into the stadium. Just a brother's birthday weekend sort of situation. So I will be up early,
Interesting.
uh, and potentially, enjoying potentially a cold beverage early in this game. And Dolphins Chiefs. This is the closest thing to a shootout, right? I just think that there's
Yeah,
little.
it
The Chiefs'
better be.
defense has definitely been better. I know that the Broncos thing was a stinker, so we'll see how it truly plays out. But it does feel like the Dolphins could catch the Chiefs on a downslide. But Andy Reid coming off of a loss is something I hate to bet on. Um, Also, the Dolphins have not beaten a good team yet. I say quote unquote good, but it's true. Just look at their schedule. So
Yeah.
I will say that the Chiefs win. They bounce back off a loss, and it's a tough. tough week for them to kind of absorb off the Broncos stuff. Patrick Mahomes, not sick, hopefully. Don't have that report yet, but I do think the Chiefs win, and I'll say the Chiefs cover, and the total here is as advertised, and we'll say Chiefs 30, Dolphins 24.
I agree with everything you said. I think it's going to be a fun game. I think there's going to be a lot of scoring. I think that the Dolphins offense is going to. I know how good the Chiefs defense is, but the Dolphins offense is going to get there because they're just so fast everywhere. Chiefs win in an absolute shootout, 35-31. I think that, I don't want to be all conspiracy theory here, but I think they want to give them a really good game. I think that's the only reason you send these two teams over. And I think because of that, you see a lot of scoring in this one. All right, let's move on. Let's go into the main slate window. Vikings versus Falcons. I'm going to say Falcons end up winning. It's a dominating defense performance. They win 17-6.
Yeah, I think that the Falcons just, I think this is a spot where you just hoping that I hate Arthur Smith. I just can't. I don't know
Don't
what to
we
do
all?
with this. I think that you're just betting on the Vikings not figuring it out on a week that they lost their quarterback. So yeah, let's go Falcons, covering the spread here. Really gross game. You're going to say that about a lot of games this week. I'll say 20-16 Falcons, and there's going to be a push there.
Gross, gross, gross. All right, let's move on. Next game is going to be the Bears and the Saints. I will say the Saints win. I will say the Saints win easy. Give me 24-14.
Yep, I agree with you. Saints, Alvin Kamara is going to have a field day. Potentially get vultured by Taysom Hill twice, like last week. And we'll say Saints cover pretty handily here. I'll say 27-14.
All right, next game up is going to be the Bucks and the Texans. I think oh man, I want to say Bucks, but I think I'm going to lean Texans winning this one. I think it's relatively close. I think it's relatively ugly too. Give me 24-21.
You said Tampa wins?
Nah, Texans win. I want
Okay.
to say Bucks win, but I think I'll lean Texans.
Yeah, I worry that Damian Pierce being hurt really hinders the offense and able to run the football. And it's a tough matchup to run the football anyway. CJ Stroud, I know it. We'll truly see what kind of adversity he's going to be able to overcome this week. But I'm going to go Bucks. I'm going to go Bucks and the win on the road here. I'll say 23-20. Tampa Bay wins.
All right. Next game up, Rams facing off against the Packers. Oh man, I want to pick you guys. I really do. But even as with you guys as the favorites, I don't believe, Jared. Rams win this one. I don't care who the QB is, man. I don't care who the QB is. Rams win this one. Ugly game. Give me 23-14.
Yeah, I mean the market is basically just calling this game a neutral pick 'em, and Green Bay gets the
Mm.
home field advantage. That really hasn't been a thing this year. I just, yeah. I mean, of course, this is the week that I don't back my team, and they'll probably end up finding a way to win. But I think Cooper Kupp just destroys us, so he will be at the top of my GPP list this week, and I think that he is in a fantastic spot, no matter who the quarterback is. So I'll go Rams win. Very disgusting game. We'll call it 20-17.
All right. Next game up is going to be the Arizona Cardinals facing off against Cleveland Browns. Eileen Browns winning this one. I think it's relatively close. I think Cardinals have a chance to cover here. I guess there are so many variables that could happen that this could be completely wrong. Like you could see Kyler start and PJ Walker start. You could see Deshaun start and Tune start. You could see
Yeah.
it's so much to rely on. So it's hard to predict a score here. I will say Browns win and they win it 17-10.
Yeah, this game is like grade A on my under list. This is one of the, it's not going to be super cold, but one of the colder games. You get this Arizona team, West Coast to East Coast at the 1 p.m. Time slot, and you have no idea who the starting quarterback is. So Give me, like, if Clayton Tune starts, this is his first start ever. So give me the Browns here. I think that they cover strictly on defense alone. And I do expect that Kareem Hunt should have a good game if Jerome Ford misses. So I'll go Browns. And I will have them cover the 8 points, which I know is a tough number to hit, but we'll go 24-13. Cleveland wins.
All right. Next game up is going to be Seahawks facing off against the Ravens. I think this could just be another stinker game where whoever the Ravens are facing off against just absolutely put up a dud. We've seen it several times, especially in that 1 p.m. window. Ravens win this one. They win convincingly, 28-13.
Yeah, I think the Seahawks, the same thing that the Cardinals have to go up against. So Uh, West Coast team traveling at 1 p.m. This is going to be one where I think the Ravens, I won't even say that they had a bad week last week, but they certainly underperformed to expectations. So I do think that the Ravens are going to come in, and no Tyler Lockett as of this moment for the Seahawks is a big, very, very scary thing. So I will say Ravens cover pretty handily here, and the Seahawks don't show up to play this one. So Baltimore 27, Seattle 13.
For sure. All right. On to the 4 p.m. window. Colts and Panthers. I could see the Panthers winning this game, man. You know what? I'm even going to say the Panthers end up winning this game. Give me Panthers win 24-21.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, man, I can't get over the fact that the Colts just run religiously, and the Panthers are just not going to be able to stop that. So I'll give the Colts the slight edge this week on the road, and we'll say this is I think this is actually one of the more sneakier shootout games. So I will say Colts, and I'll say Colts and the over. So give me Colts, Colts 27, Panthers 24.
All right. Next game up. Second to last game up. This one's a doozy, man. I do not know what to do with this one. Giants and Raiders. I'm going to say the Raiders win just because they're happy with the new head coaching situation and stuff. And I think that there's a chance that they win. So give me the Raiders, and I'll say the Raiders win 20-17.
Uh,
21-17, just so they cover the over.
yeah, I mean, yeah, it'll be. Man, it would be an awesome moment for the Raiders to win this game. They kind of got not really a layup necessarily, but they could have faced any other team in the NFL. But they get the Giants this week and Daniel
Yeah.
Jones. Give me the Raiders to win as well. I think no Darren Waller and a little bit of a hobbled Saquon is definitely concerning there. Not really sure what Daniel Jones is going to look like. So a little bit uncertain there, but Raiders, I do think that they end up winning this game, and you're going to see them cover too. So I will say 24-17 Raiders.
All right, last game up. It is going to be the Cowboys facing off against the Eagles. 30-20, Eagles win. We hit the over. Eagles win in convincing fashion. Pushes them enough to get there to that 30-point mark with the Cowboys scoring 20. But Eagles win 30-20.
Yeah, I'm going to be on the side of the Cowboys being a little bit more pushy. So I'll say Eagles win and cover at home, and this game lives up to expectations. So give me 28-24 Eagles win.
All right, sounds good. Jared, we're done with the slate. Give me your final thoughts. How do members win money this week?
The final thoughts on this one here. Don't overthink the last game. And I think that getting that 6K running back on FanDuel specifically is, or maybe just that third running back in general in your lineups for cash is something that is going to be very, very important to do. And it might feel uncomfortable to do. So there are clear value plays at the receiver position that's going to help this out. And I think that tight end is more of a crapshoot than ever this week. So we'll see.
Yep.
Things need to kind of shake themselves out here, but the running back spot's very good. The AJ Brown spot's very good. And I think that this is setting itself up for a lot of 4:20 or 4 o'clock plays in your lineup. So maybe you get that morning to afternoon nap in after the Chiefs game.
Heck yeah. All right, let's get out of here, Jared. I think it's going to be a really good week. I have a good feeling. I like how we're breaking down the games. Like you said, they're ugly games, but it's something that we talk about with NBA and with MLB all the time. We don't necessarily apply it to NFL, but everyone has to deal with the same slate. So I think we're in a good spot in terms of where we're currently at. Thank you all for listening. And as always, my name is Joshua Riemer. Good night and good skill.